to my channel, Homemaker-in-Progress. Today I'm going to be starting a new series. It's going to be 30 meals in 30 days, and I'm going to show you what I made, and then I'm going to tell you a quick tutorial of how I make it. So first up, we've got my chili. I made this on accident, but it's super, super simple. So basically, onions, saute those in a pan, and then you're going to add your ground beef, and I do about a pound of ground beef for this, and I just brown that, and then I add a can of pinto beans. One can, I don't drain it, and I just add that to the mixture. Then I do either like 1 can of tomato sauce. You could do 1 can of cubed tomatoes or diced tomatoes, or I also like to use just 1 can of tomato soup, just the mixture itself, like the Campbell's mixture. And then you can add your seasonings. I typically do like cumin, salt, pepper, maybe garlic, something like that, and then you can top that with cheese or sour cream. And it's super, super simple, and you can make it all in one pot. Next in the lineup, it's slow cooked chicken, which I just put 2 whole chickens in the crock pot and I let those slow cook for a day. And that just gets them really nice and tender. And then you also end up with a couple extra things. So, for one, the slow cooked chicken, I just did that and I seasoned that like salt, pepper, garlic, and cooked that down. And then I served it with some orzo, which is also another really easy thing to make. And I do orzo the cheat way. I don't do like full on risotto. I'll just put orzo with some broth and I just cook that in a pot. I don't add little bits at a time. I just put everything together and I just let it boil and simmer down until it's the consistency that you want it. And then once I'm done with that slow cooked chicken, I can then use it for other meals. So I pull apart everything, I get rid of all the bones, and then I'm able to use both the stock that's left over or the broth that's in there. And you can use that for other recipes. So when you're making orzo, when you make rice, if you're making soup, you can use that. And then the meat, which is already like shredded, I can use in other recipes. And it's just like it's already cooked. All I need to do is just throw it into a recipe and heat it up, which makes meals much simpler. The third thing was my tomato pasta beef, whatever you want to call that, beef and tomato pasta. Anyway, this one I actually have a video to the specifics on all of it, but it's also pretty simple. So you've got your ground beef that you're going to saute up. You're going to add orzo and the tomato sauce and probably some broth so that that orzo can get nice and soft. And then some spinach to it. And basically, it's a one pot thing and it's super nice, yummy. You can top it with some Parmesan cheese. It's very simple. And I really like this meal. It's like one of my favorites. So go give it a try, and if you haven't watched the video, I will link it here. Fourth on the lineup is my chicken Alfredo, and I do this in the Instapot. So typically, chicken Alfredo maybe seems like a lot of work because you've got to make the sauce and you've got to do the pasta and you've got the chicken. The way that I do this when I'm like going to be gone and I don't have a lot of time when I get home to like make a full-on meal is I put it in the Instapot. And so basically, you can just put pasta. It does not need to be cooked. You can set that in there with some broth, the chicken, and then you can put the cream and the cheese on top and just let it simmer for me. I do this for like 6 hours in the Instapot on the slow cook one, and it's done when I get home. Add some garlic for seasoning, salt, pepper, whatever you want, really. But it's very simple, and actually, it still turns out you don't have to do all the separate combining beforehand and like make the sauce on its own. You can put everything in Instapot. It still turns out, and you still get a good meal. And fifth in this lineup is my teriyaki meatballs with orzo. So the teriyaki meatballs are ground beef, onion, coconut aminos, and that's really where you get the like, quote teriyaki flavoring that I like to use instead of using soy or teriyaki sauce. So I do that, and then ginger is a really good flavor to go with that. And then you basically just make meatballs out of it and saute those. I did them in my cast iron, so you get a really nice sear on them. And it kind of caramelizes in some ways because you got the coconut amino, so it's like it's kind of sugary in some ways. And then I just did that with some orzo. Orzo is something that I can also do like a big batch of, and then I can use it for multiple meals throughout the week, which is awesome because then I don't have to do so much cooking on the individual weeknights. Sixth meal that I did was a orzo, spinach, chicken, kind of Alfredo of sorts, but not quite because I used milk and then I did a roux instead of doing the traditional cream and Parmesan, which it does have a little bit of a different flavor, but it was still something that I made all entirely in my cast iron and just put all together into one pot. I had some leftover orzo, so I just heated that up with the rest of the meal. And number 7 on the list is chicken noodle soup. So, if you guys are not aware, we've been having some sickness going around. So, chicken noodle soup just seems like a great option. So, basically, what I did here was I made a chicken noodle soup. I did onions, carrots, celery. That's my base. And I sauteed those. And then I added the shredded chicken, which was still left over from the slow cooked chicken. And then I added in noodles, which I already had pre cooked. You don't have to pre-cook these because you're going to have the broth and it will cook down anyway, but I already had them pre-cooked, so I just added those to the soup. And then I actually made a roux with my sourdough starter, which I've never done before. But basically, that was butter, sourdough starter, and I mixed those up. And then I added broth to that. And it was a pretty thick mixture. And then I added that to the soup with some broth. And that made it like a really thick soup, but it was still really good, very yummy. And then I topped that with some sourdough bread with butter, and it was really good. I went back for seconds. So, um, really yummy. All right, everyone. Thank you guys all for watching Homemaker in Progress today.